Welcome to Selling in the Age of AI.
Yeah, this is good stuff. So,
must-listen podcast for sales professionals who lean into technology without leaning on it. Dive into the future of sales with your hosts, the dynamic and inspiring Frank Somma, renowned keynote speaker, best-selling author, seminar leader, and business coach. Get ready for game-changing insights and strategies that value technology but place humanity at the top of the sales pyramid.
Well, welcome everyone to Selling in the Age of AI. Today I am thrilled to tell you my guest is Michael Reddington. Mike is a certified forensic interviewer, executive resource, and author of The Disciplined Listening Method. He teaches executives and sales teams how to apply the strategic observation and persuasive communication skills necessary to obtain the everyday confessions hiding in their high-impact conversations. My take on this is, in terms of just pure knowledge and takeaways to elevate your sales game, Mike Reddington is at the top of the pyramid. You will not find anyone who can drop more gems per hour than Mike. I suggest you listen to this podcast 2 or 3 times, take notes, and practice the things that you hear. Every time Mike speaks, it's a masterclass in high-end listening and selling skills. Welcome, Mike. I couldn't be more pleased to have somebody of your caliber on our podcast.
Well, thank you, Frank. It's great to see you again. I was thrilled when you sent me the invitation to join the show. Thank you. And thank you for all of those super nice things you just said. The check's in the mail. I appreciate it.
So it's, I say listen to it 2 or 3 times, and we can just jump up because you are a forensic interviewer and listening expert. And a lot of what I talk about in my sales seminars and keynotes is listening. But I want to start off by saying I told people to listen to podcasts 2 or 3 times, not because I want you to listen to my podcast so many times, but because you have so many ideas, Mike, and every time someone says something that resonates with someone, they begin an internal dialogue about that thing. And then they'll miss the next 15 seconds of the podcast unwittingly. So I've always learned that if you listen to things that you really love a few times, you pick up more and more each time, yeah?
I agree completely. It's like watching your favorite movie. So now that I'm going to come up with one, Tombstone is probably my favorite movie. People can laugh at me if you grew up in the 80s and 90s, whatever. But if I find that movie on any random cable television show on a rainy day and I decide I'm not getting off the couch, it doesn't matter how many times I've seen that movie. I'm going to pick up on a line, a camera angle, something that I've never seen before is going to jump out at me. And I do believe that the more you're interested in something, the more it holds your curiosity, but the more reps you have with it, the more you're open to learning and picking up on those nuances. So yeah, I'm 100% on board.
Yeah, for sure. So, the name of our podcast is Selling in the Age of AI, and we began this because I've talked to a number of sales professionals who are concerned about being replaced by AI and not really understanding the tools to enhance their game, but more, this fear of how will I wind up on the sidelines when point-and-click technology takes my job? What's your feeling on this in a general sense?
Well, I appreciate the way you asked it, because really what I have is a feeling. It's not a super informed or expert opinion. It is just that. It's a feeling. And to draw a correlation, I talk about my young son a lot, but my son's in elementary school. And a lot of times when he's saying, well, I'm worried about this or I'm worried about that, my question to him is, okay, so what's your plan, or what's your plan B, or how are you going to work hard to ensure a different outcome? And I think the same holds true to a bit here. And I've learned so much from you in our conversations that in many ways, sales is such a relationship-based business that if we're looking at this right now saying, okay, well, there's no doubt that AI is going to continue to creep on what we do, how, when, where, to be determined. So what am I doing now to differentiate myself, not just as a sales professional, but as a human being, my ability to connect and develop relationships with others? So, and I say this jokingly, when the computers do take over, inevitably, that people still want to reach out to you for your expertise, your connection, your ability to help. So part of my feeling is, okay, whatever the concern level should or shouldn't be, what are we doing to get ahead of it? What's the plan? How are we getting ahead of it? The second is, for right now, and I love how you said it, how are we using it to enhance, not replace what we do? Because from the buying side, it's going to be pretty obvious to people who's just copying and pasting AI scripts and who is actually putting their own expertise, care, attention, and customization into the messaging. So I have absolutely no problem at all with people who want to take an email and dump it into an AI program and help clean it up or get a certain tone or get certain things. But if all we're doing is going to AI and asking for how to write a sales email or what are the top 10 reasons why someone should buy, well, then not only are we basically doing the same thing our competitors are doing, we could be doing it worse because we're relying on whatever, and I say this in air quotes, potential garbage has been put into the AI system to come out. So to use it as a foundation, to use it as a clarification tool, to use it as a way to enhance what we're already doing. But I truly believe, and you've got the cover of your book behind you talking about person to person, so much of what we do in really relies, I almost said relate, I meant to say rely. I swear I talk for a living. Relies on our ability to connect with other people. So use what's available now to enhance your ability to connect with other people, but make it yours, make it your own. Use your own expertise, your own experience, your own ability to connect and help with others. And while doing that, build the groundwork. So as AI continues to infringe, we can use it without being replaced by it.
So, Mike, I'm a 20-something-year-old sales professional. I'm just building my persona, my business. Where do you send me? Like at this point, what kinds of things do you think are the highest value things for me to work on to do that differentiation you mentioned?
Man, that is a great question. And how much time and available resources do they have to go get these things, right?
Right. But where do you start? Where do you work on, you know?
So I've got a couple of thoughts on this, and I would love for you to jump in and cut me off anytime in this conversation, man, please, especially with your depth of expertise. So for me, there's a double-edged sword because under stress, we go to what we know. And one of the things that salespeople run into all the time is the risk of that verbal vomit. I get into a conversation and a little bit of stress gets turned up. So I just start talking about how great my company, my product, my service, my thing is, and I risk turning people off. So that's something we want to avoid. But to put that aside for a second, I truly believe in my bones that the people who are most successful in most conversations are the ones who have as many variables under control as possible. Because the more potential variables I have under control, the less I have to think about, and the more I can focus, observe, and react to what's happening in front of me right now. So with that variable under control piece as the backdrop, I honestly believe that as a new sales professional, if we can work really hard, not just at learning our stuff, but learning how to apply it to others. So it's not just here's what differentiates our product, or here's why we're awesome, or here's what our customers are saying, or here's what we offer. Yeah, that's baseline. We've got to learn that, but learn that with the lens of how do I apply it to other people? I learned an accidental lesson like 20 years ago, maybe. I was at a Starbucks in Newport Beach, California, talking to a guy who I admire on million's an exaggeration, right? But on many, many, many different levels. The dude's a genius. He's awesome. He and I were talking, and I asked him a question about his business. And he looked at me and he said, Mike, I'm not a content applier. I'm a content provider. And right then it clicked in my brain. I said, okay, I'm going to be different. I'm going to be the content applier. In his business, it works for him. He provides people with the content. They figure out how to use it. Cool. It works for him. Right. But for me, I feel like helping people solve the riddle. It's one thing to give somebody information or bring them up to speed on a new alternative solution product, whatever it is, and have them walk away going, oh, that sounds really cool. I've got to figure out how to use that. But if I can help connect those dots for them, now we're in better shape. So as they start to learn their own, learn how to apply your own stuff to the people that you're going to be speaking with. And then from there, I think we can really, and I'll wrap up in just a second, I promise, we can really work on fine tuning, getting to know the other people. One little mini rant. I've seen a fair amount of like public speaking training and those kinds of things. And I feel like many, not all, but many of them miss the boat. And this is one man's opinion. So shoot this down, man. You're not going to hurt my feelings. They focus on giving the presentation without any ums and ers and hesitations and all this stuff. That's hard to do when you don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
The better you know what you're talking about, the easier it is to avoid the ums and ers, and the easier it is to apply it and shift it to somebody else. So for me, it's learn your stuff. While you're learning it, learn how to apply it to somebody else. Go, stumble, trip, fall, learn, screw up. That's how we all do this. Yeah. And then start really crafting your communication and start building on from there.
You know, Mike, there's so many things that came at me during that. One is, I'll give you the evaluation from my mentor, a guy named Dr. Rob Gilbert. As a speaker, Dr. Rob is my mentor. He's my go-to guy. And Rob said to me the very first time we met, he said, I'll save you, a ton of time in your speaking life. He said, speaking is, and I think this applies to salespeople too, it's more jazz than it is classical piano. He said, I don't want you to have a sheet of music and play every note. I want you to know what key we're in and then go. And in order to do that, you have to have a depth of knowledge and trust that that knowledge will come to the forefront when you need it. And I believe that as a sales professional, that's kind of a little bit about what you're saying here is, master the nuances of what you have to do, understand completely the customer's perspective, et cetera, and then trust that you don't have to be in your own head. And one of the things you said in your book that I highlighted that this was leading me to, it says, this sentiment is often greeted with the same response. Oh no, I'm sorry, wrong one. Many approaches to improving our listening skills focus on what we need to say, to become better listeners, but the inner focus distracts. So that brings me to this concept of mastery, right? So, the 4 elements of learning, right? You don't know what you don't know, then you know what you don't know, then you, right? So, and then you get to mastery where, it's, you don't need to know, you just know it and it comes out. So when you were talking about this idea that the inner focus distracts, I think the most important thing that you and I can give salespeople today is as many things as we can on the listening side, and you as a forensic interviewer, how to extract information from someone and be comfortable and confident doing that. So with all of that rambling that I just gave, talk to me about inner focus. How do I do this and not be in my own head worrying about the next thing I have to ask?
Great question. We'll start there, and then I'll kind of play it forward and shut up soon, I promise.
Please,
but when it comes to that inner focus, I do think that a lot of it comes to having those variables under control. So when I used to teach interrogation, sometimes we would spend, depending on the client, a full day talking about nonverbal communication and different cues to observe and all these things. And people would inevitably come up to me at the end of the day and say, okay, Mike, that was great. I appreciate that's a lot to take in. So how do I get better at seeing all this stuff? Right. And my answer would be memorize what you're going to say. And they would say, no, Mike, you didn't understand the question. I'm not asking about what I'm saying. I'm asking about what I'm seeing. How do I get better at seeing this stuff? I'm like, no, I'm picking up what you're putting down. Memorize what you're going to say. And then they'd look at me funny and be like, dude, I only have a certain amount of functioning brain cells. So if I'm trying to split them between what am I going to say, what am I seeing, and what am I going to do with my observation, I can't do that. I killed too many brain cells as a young man to be able to balance all of those things.
We won't go there.
So for me, if I can have, and I don't want to use the word script because it gives people shivers, right? And I agree with you. I think that jazz analogy is perfect. It's not about memorizing a script because I'm going to hit play and just go. But if we really know our stuff, I don't have to come up with a new plan for every conversation. I have to come up with 10% of a new plan, 15% of a new plan, maybe 25% of a new plan. I just have to deviate what I already know. I don't have to come up with it brand new every time. So when it comes to limiting that internal monologue and staying focused on what's going on in front of us, I do believe that so much of it comes down to being prepared for what you're going to say before you get there. Okay. That could be, what are the illustrations you really want to make? What are the questions you really want to ask? What are going to be your responses to the most likely objections or challenges or questions you might get? If you have those, for me, a lot of times it's, what's my opening? As long as I have my opening down, everything else tends to kind of fall into place after that. So if you've got those handful of pieces relatively together, then you can really focus. I'll add one thing and then I'll stop. When it comes to then the observation piece, for me, one of the absolute most important things I've found is having an outcome focus. So if you and I are having a conversation and I see your behavior change, or I hear your tone change, or your speed of delivery changes, or you use a word I didn't expect, or you have a reaction, in order for me to give that value, I have to be able to correlate the behavior switch to the trigger that caused it and evaluate it in the context of the situation, and then say, okay, now that I know that, how does it help me get closer to my goal? So if I don't have the outcome in mind, now all of these observations become dangerous to useless, depending on where we are. So know your stuff, remain outcome focused, and then most of the other pieces can fall into place after that.
Again, a ton to unpack there. So I could tell you when I was a little baby sales guy and somebody said, yes, you can come to my office and talk about your product. I thought, okay, I'm going to go to this person's office. And that's where my thought process ended. There was no preparation in terms of what questions do I want to ask? What's my opening? So that's a mouthful right there, Mike. How many people think, I'm a salesperson, I'm going to go in and evaluate and get started? A lot, not necessarily the information part. I mean, I think that's important too, right? You want to get into as much information about the company, the prospect, Google them, LinkedIn, read about them. That's all depending on what you're selling and when you're selling, that's important. But I think just the idea of what you're saying to me, of preparing for the kinds of questions I want to ask, allows my brain to be open to react to some of the things I'm hearing. Now, the next part of that you were talking about is outcome-based conversations. And I've often associated that with people, like in a sports analogy. I'm playing offense. I know where I'm going. You don't know where I'm going. So how do I ask questions that help me to get to the outcome I want? Maybe you could talk about the kinds of questions generally in sales, the hows, whats, the whys. Where are they important? When are they important? You have so much information on this. How can you help us to figure out good questions to ask?
That's a great question. And I've got a couple of different ways to go. Can I go on a little mini rant first and then ask your feedback on it? And I promise I'll segue right into the questions. I'm not avoiding it.
We'll remember.
When I was listening to what you just said, it brought my mind to two maybe perspectives, might be the word, mindsets that I find potentially pervasive. I'm not saying everybody in sales that bother me.
Yeah.
When I was in interrogation, even though my teammates and I almost exclusively got called out for cases where people had already been interrogated, nobody confessed, and there was no evidence, we still looked at it as it's our job to get the truth. So, I mean, we didn't always, more often than not, we didn't always. But so all of our preparation was, what do we do to get to the truth? I feel like all too often in sales, I run into people with the mentality is based on, or the approach is based on failure, not success. This probably won't work. They probably won't listen. They probably won't pick up the phone. They probably won't want. And I know it's a numbers game, right? We've all been down that road. I'm going to just be, you got to make 1,000 calls to get 100 responses, to get 10 meetings, to get 2 clients, whatever. So I know the math that's there, but I feel like sometimes that math drives the failure focused mentality instead of the success focused mentality that causes some of what I'm not going to bother planning. I'm not going to bother thinking because this probably isn't going to work anyway, which leads into the second one, which I feel like a lot of times, especially in that prospecting, maybe even into the discovery stage, it's a little bit of an exclusionary process instead of an inclusionary process. So as I'm trying to figure out, is this really a good client for me? I'm doing it with an exclusionary mindset. I don't want to waste my time. So if you're not a good fit for me, I'm going to rule you out. Well, I could be cutting myself off at the knees here because maybe it doesn't seem like a good fit, but it could be. Or maybe, man, you're not a good fit for me, but somebody in your networking group is, and I'm not giving us the opportunity to get there. So I feel like how we plan and how we create our questions, which is the question you asked me 5 minutes ago, a lot of times comes off of that mindset. Am I going in feeling like, well, this isn't going to work and I need to figure out if they're going to be a waste of my time first? Then I'm asking ineffective questions right out of the gate. Whereas if I take an approach that says, okay, how do I make this work? And let me do everything I can to see if they are a good fit. Now they'll wash out anyway if they're not. And yeah, maybe it doesn't work, but I'm giving myself a better chance. Based on your experience, am I way off base with that? And then I promise I'll answer your question.
No, I think that that's, especially in the prospecting portion of it, it's about, weeding through and finding something that's going to work, as opposed to digging in deeper on each potential opportunity and really finding out. I think, a little adjunct to that might be, if you have enough working, then you can truly evaluate things. Because I want to talk, you talked a little bit about desperation, but let's get back to this point, and then we'll go to that one. But I think that's important, right? You have to have enough stuff in your pipeline so that you can evaluate honestly, and not whip through them looking for trying to chase the slow deer all the time.
Yeah, I like that analogy. Yeah, I agree. But to get back to the question, so when we're asking people questions, especially in like a sales environment, I know you've heard me say this before, so try not to roll your eyes. Your suspects, my old life, your prospects have essentially been Mirandized. They know they have the right to remain silent because anything that they say can and will be used against them at your very first opportunity. They know that. So they're more likely to withhold information. They're more likely to be hesitant. They're more likely to distrust at the start of the conversation. Sure. I don't see that as a bad thing. I see that as, I've been rightfully accused of being overly pragmatic in my time, but I see that as A, being the reality, but B, we can use that to our advantage once we accept it and stop trying to rationalize it or explain why it's not true. So if we go in understanding that people are probably more likely to withhold information, that's fine. Now we want to do a couple of things, and we've talked about this before. We really want to try to lead off by resonating. Okay. Before we get into that whole differentiate, substantiate, why we're awesome piece. And to tie in the interrogation piece again real quick, people will generally open up and tell you the truth when they believe that you're credible, the truth is known or will soon be known, and maybe most importantly, they have the opportunity to save face. So especially in the early stages of questioning, we want to make sure that we sound credible without bragging, that we illustrate this isn't our first rodeo. We know the truth. We've been down similar roads before. And by the way, if you're brand new, your teammates have been down this road before. So swap out I for we and say the same thing. You're not lying. Your team's been down this. Your company's been down this road before. And then we want to make sure we help people save face. And I know in sales, we are often looking for those moments where somebody thinks, I didn't realize that, I didn't know that, that's new to me, and we have that educational opportunity. That's great. We want to try to avoid the swinging light bulb moments by forcing somebody who's the king or queen of their castle to look at you and say, oh, I didn't know that. We don't want to embarrass them or make them feel stupid. We want to open them up to education. So one of the rules that we live by is the concept of illustrate before you investigate. I want to show some of my understanding of the situation before I ask a question. So we think of each question as its own illustration. So just to do a quick example,
please.
One of my favorite things to say is oftentimes at this point in the process, organizations seek us out when they.
Oftentimes, at this point in the process, organizations seek us out when they. So that's kind of an invitation to say, I understand where you are at the moment. And it's also a way not to let you feel embarrassed if you had questions in that, I'm kind of leading up to that. I expect you to be here and not, gee, I know all this stuff and I'll fill in the gaps for you.
Yeah. So I love that. And you can swap out the word organization, right? You can pull that word out and put any word in that fits in for whoever's listening, whatever works in your world. You can pull organizations out, put a different word in. But what that does by saying oftentimes at this point in the process, organizations seek us out because it's not my first rodeo.
Right.
I've had this conversation before. And now when I illustrate why people seek us out, and that phrase is different. I'm not saying my name's Mike Reddington and these are all the problems I solve for people and these are all the future states I help create for people. That's bragging. When I say people seek us out because, and then list a couple problems or a couple future states, now I'm saying this is why people come to me,
right? Which
tends to resonate better. So I'm sounding more credible. It's not my first rodeo. I'm illustrating that the truth is already known. I've been down here before. Here's a couple examples. And to your point, I'm helping them save face. The word you can be one of the most dangerous words in the English language. I mean, imagine, Frank, if you and I sat down and I'm the sales guy and I'm like, Frank, it's great to meet you. You know, as I've done a lot of research on your company, it certainly feels like you're in a position where you're trying to do and you're trying to get, and you have already. So I'm curious, where are you? That sounds so super judgmental. It puts you on the defensive. So now if I, oftentimes organizations seek us out if I give that illustration, now I can come back and ask any number of questions. And I'm going to have to use the word you when I ask the question, of course. Sure. But now it could be, how does that line up with your experience? I'm curious what might be different in this situation. What could be another one? I'd be grateful. And here's one of my absolute favorite questions to ask. So at this point, I'd be grateful for you to take as much time as you're comfortable to please walk me through the current process your team is using to complete X task. So now I've earned the right to ask the question, and I've made you feel more comfortable to open up instead of coming in and me just firing off. So how many and how often and do you and have you and would you and could you? And now you're just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You're trying to fit me for something I don't know I want to buy.
You know what I think that leads me to most of all, Mike, is patience. Yeah. And it's so difficult, but if you know where you're going, right? If again, I know the outcome that I want, and that outcome may be, I'm an insurance provider and I want to see your deck page and I want to go through it with you, or I'm a VoIP consultant and I want to get into the nuances of the features of your system because I know it's old, or whatever products I'm selling. You know, I'm talking to a doctor and I'm selling certain. I'm representing a pharma company and I want you to use my drug instead of the one that you've been using for arthritis, whatever. So I know where I want to go. And I think what you just said about that's like this idea of being anxious, right? So I used to say people can smell desperation, like a dog smells fear. And I don't know what it is, but when I have nothing in the door on the 30th of the month and I go see a client, I'm never getting the business. They smell how bad I want it. When I have 150% of my goal in by the 12th and I go see a client on the 16th, it's like somebody brought a dump truck of business up and dumped it on my head, like I can't close it. So there's this, it's kind of like momentum in sports, right? It's undefinable, but we know when it happens. So how do I adopt that kind of a mindset, or how do I utilize the questioning techniques that to maybe put myself there when I may not really be there yet, or to avoid that idea of being anxious or desperate?
That's all great points. And when it comes to how people evaluate us, calm is contagious.
Okay.
So the more calm we can be, and often calm is contagious for us. So even in times where, just last week, I had to go to Arizona for a client engagement, and it was kind of a dual thing where an organization I work with occasionally brought me in to do some work on their behalf. So I made none of the travel arrangements. I just go to the assigned hotel. I get there and they say, "Oh, Mr. Reddington, we don't have a room for you." I'm like, "All right, no problem. I'll just pay for one."
Right.
We're sold out. There's nothing we can do for you. Now, immediately, honestly, my blood pressure goes up a little bit, right? Now, I'm outside Phoenix, Arizona. There's tons of hotels around. I'm not going to sleep on the street tonight. I know this, but I'm supposed to be at a dinner and meeting people, and all this stuff is supposed to be happening within the hour. And here I am, I just got off a cross-country flight and I'm being told they don't have a room for me. So I had to take a deep breath and start calming myself down. Because if I don't calm myself down, I'm not going to be able to calm this person down. Right. So not only is calm contagious, but it helps calm us. So to bring that story home, I guess, I said, okay, if there's nothing you can do for me, there's nothing you can do. I went outside. I texted my contacts. They couldn't respond because they were teaching. So I go back in, I got somebody else, and I was as nice as I could possibly be. I know she tried to help me. I know it's sold out. Here's what I'm dealing with. Here's what I know. Here's the people. And then I never asked, can you do this? My question was, I would be grateful if you could please walk me through the process of who would need to be involved and what approval we would need to get in order for me to secure whatever last room might be being held at the moment. It took another 20 minutes. I got a room. So by me staying calm and helping them stay calm, That was probably a big piece of the puzzle. So whether it's taking deep breaths, whether it's listening to your favorite song, whether it's doing mental reps before you go in, honestly, as crazy as this might sound, walk a little slower. I don't mean like action movie slow-mo scenes,
Right.
but like just manage your pace as you're walking in. Because if you manage your pace, you're managing how fast you're thinking, you're managing your breath rate, you're managing all of that.
Yeah, you're managing.
So slow it down as you go in. And we're maintaining outcome focus, that long-term thinking instead of that short-term thinking.
That's the patience piece,
really
Mike. And that's, I think, even in conversations with, a significant other or your child, you may know the answer right now. Hey, this happened at school. We'll do this, this, and this. It can't be heard until, I learned this from a wonderful bereavement psychologist, believe it or not, of all people. And I had an issue a long time ago. My brother was hurt, and I didn't feel like I was connecting with him. And Dan taught me that I can't lead anybody anywhere until I meet them where they are. Beautiful. And I know you have a ton of experience. But that takes a lot of patience, right? You know the outcome you want. You know the questions you need answered. But how do you stay in the moment of patience and understand, how can we teach people the payoff? If they can be patient, stay in the moment, the payoff and rapport and future. Like, how do you explain that?
Yeah, I don't know that people can understand the payoff until they experience it for themselves. All of a sudden, when they're telling you that much more information, and when you're securing a bigger deal because of what you learned, and when they're coming back for you to re-up business, and we stop and think about it, like, oh, damn, I listened to that guy for 10 minutes when I wanted to cut him off, but he felt like I was the first guy that listened to him in 3 months. And so now here we are 2 years later, and he's taking me to the Yankees game. Like, there's all kinds of long-term benefits for that. For me, it comes down to, and it was a learned skill. Oddly enough, I credit interrogation for it, but it was a learned skill to value the outcome over my emotion. Because often when we cut people off, when we jump into the conversation, when we've got something in our mind that we just have to get out right now, we are giving in to that emotion. So this is what I'm feeling. I have to address or act in a way that aligns with this emotion. I'm going to do it. But if I value the longer term outcome enough, now when that emotion kicks up, I can say, I'll get there. This is more important. But I have to have something more important to compare that against. And you said something at least twice earlier, where you're going.
Right.
I am a card-carrying, hill-defending, flag-waving believer that if you know where the conversation needs to end, it doesn't matter where it starts. Right. And all too often, especially in sales, I just want to control this whole conversation the whole time.
Right.
Brother, when people don't feel like they have control, they're going to fight for that control. If I let them feel like they're in control, they're not fighting for control, which means I have control. So if I don't have the Manhattan map memorized in my head, but if I'm trying to get from the Battery to Central Park, there are quite literally hundreds of combinations I can take to get there. And that's just on the roads, not counting the subways and everything else.
Sure.
So if I just say I have to go this route, then traffic and roadblocks and stoplights and all this stuff could slow me down. But if I say I'm going to go north, and then all of a sudden, north's a problem. Well, I could go east or west. I'll pick west. West is a problem. I'll go north again. So as long as you know where you want the conversation to start, and this comes back to patience. I'm sorry, as long as you know where you want the conversation to end, let them choose where it starts.
Yeah,
and then use what they give you to get where you want to go.
Oh yeah, and we're back to the jazz analogy, because I'm picking up off of what you're playing, and I know where I want to go, and I have to believe that I'm going to get there, and that's a really important thing. You said something else in your book I want to read you that relates to this. We're going back, a little bit to what we were talking about earlier, but I didn't want to miss this. Don't sound too needy. The more you sound like you need the information, the more power it gives her, and the less likely it is that she will share it. Talk about that human thing about, sensing neediness and withholding information. How did that learn that in interrogation? And maybe you have a story behind that. I don't know.
Yeah, the story from the book.
Okay.
So very long story short, I went out, I did a series of interrogations. It was typical. I was in downtown Chicago. There's a bunch of theft going on. We don't really know who's doing it. You got to come in and figure it out. They'd already done some in-house investigations that didn't work. So I go in that day, I get 2 confessions, one at the employee level, one at the management level, wrap it up. Everybody's happy. I come back to the office and we audio video recorded all of our interviews and interrogations.
Okay.
So when we would bring them back, the owners of the company, who are like Mount Rushmore level interrogation experts, would sit down and watch our videos with us. And like, you walk in the room with an ego and you walk out with dust in a bag.
Yeah, that's
like,
nerve-wracking.
It doesn't matter how good you did, but what that did for my learning curve was like, I can't properly account for the lessons that I learned. But in that particular case, like, I thought I was doing well. I mean, hell, I got a written confession and that woman is the one that rolled over on the manager. So, I mean, it worked out well. But I come back and I'm sitting next to Dave Zalowski, who's like an uncle to me. He's an amazing guy. And he just pauses the video and he's like, "You sound needy." And like any child, I look at him, I'm like, "No, I don't."
Instant reaction.
Yeah, no, I don't. "Yes, you do, Michael." So he replays it. I'm like, "Oh shit, I kind of do." And he brought it home for me. He said, when you sound too needy, you give the other person all the power in the conversation. So I'll start an interrogation, then I'll bring it to sales. In interrogation, let's say that I am talking to somebody who did something or knows something. Like, if they do have information that would be very important for me to get. If they can tell that I need it badly, they can win by not giving it to me. Mm. So even if they still go to jail, they still lose their job, bad things still happen to them, they can walk out and hold their head up high because they can say, "Doesn't matter. I won. I didn't give Mike what he was looking for because I made it feel like I needed it so much. I handed the power and control over to them." Now, there's a delicate balance in there. Yeah. If I bring it to sales, if I appear too needy, now I appear, to go back to what you were talking about, desperate. And often if I appear desperate, even if I know my stuff better than anybody, and even if I'm representing a great company, great product, great service, great reputation, long history, all of these things, desperation is a credibility killer. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've been there. I've been in, like, to your point, I had a rough couple of months. I'm having a conversation with someone. This could be a big deal that turns my whole year around. I've been busy, haven't really been paying attention to business development. All of a sudden it hits my brain like, "Oh, damn, I need this one." And I can almost sense it. Like, "Oh no, you got to bring that back." And I was given back in interrogation, I was given a great analogy. Like, if I had to walk across a bridge that was 5 feet off the ground, would I be nervous? No. But if I had to walk across a bridge that was a mile off the ground, would I be nervous? Yes. I did it with my son, and I didn't want him to see how scared I was because I didn't want him to be scared, right? But all you're doing is walking across the bridge. That's it. 1 foot in front of the other, same step, same process. The only thing that changed was the height. So if I'm not paying attention to the height and I'm just paying attention to the process, it shouldn't be an issue. So for me, that's a lesson that I've tried to fall back on. And I know it's cliche, but if I'm trying to avoid feeling needy or desperate and giving people that power in the conversation. So in sales, it could hurt my credibility and they could say no. Or maybe they sense it and now they're driving a super hard bargain. They're asking for all kinds of concessions and extra things. They feel like I'm desperate and they're trying to take advantage of it. It's probably the biggest two. There's more outcomes in there. But so if I don't want those things to happen, then just focus on the process. Right. And if I focus on the process, hopefully it helps me keep a lid on that desperation feeling, which we all get sometimes, in order to work through to a stronger conclusion.
Yeah, needy never works, right? So, I mean, you had an analogy in your book about the dog in the yard and calling the dog, and the dog doesn't want to come, but if you turn around and leave. So this is, I remember, you remember that movie, Natural Born Killers with Woody Harrelson?
Of course I do.
Okay, so there's a moment in that movie where I don't remember the lady's name that played his counterpart.
Juliette Lewis?
Juliette Lewis goes to a garage and there's a mechanic there and she comes on to the mechanic and he jumps her bones like super fast. He's ripping at her and she shoots him dead. And as she walks out, she says, "Next time, don't be so effing anxious." And I just thought, boy, that's sales right there. Don't jump all over me. Just sit back, ask some questions, And in the beginning of this, I was asking you a little bit about the types of questions. So tell me about the types of questions in terms of why, how, what, those kinds of things. What are some bogeys that I'm unaware of in my own language patterns when I'm asking questions of a client?
Well, I highly doubt you're unaware of them. But why is a big one. So oftentimes we ask the question why with great intentions, but it comes across as an accusation.
Okay.
Why is a type of question that makes it very, very hard for people to save face. In that same family are questions like, did you, or why didn't you? So now we're combining two, but those come across as accusations every time. So we really want to work to avoid those. This is common sense, right? We want to avoid direct questions, but a great way to figure out if you're asking a direct question is the word you, the second word in the question. Did you, could you, would you, have you? Like if that word you is the second word, you're asking a yes or no question. We want to get away from that. Okay. So really what I try to do as often as possible is I think about asking questions like an upside down triangle.
Okay.
I want to start broad and even sometimes give people poetic license. They might go in a direction I didn't expect. Mm-hmm. But to your point, if I know where I'm going, that could help me. It's probably not going to hurt me. And I want to work my way down to the specifics. So if it's a manufacturing deal, I don't want to ask somebody, is your team capable of manufacturing 5,000 units in 6 months? If they want the deal, they're going to say yes, whether they can or can't. And if they don't want the deal, they're going to say no, whether they can or can't. Right. So instead, I want to ask about the process. I want to learn. I want to ask questions that come across as invitations, not attacks, that motivate people to open up and give me intelligence. All too often, especially in sales, we end up collecting information. We're checking boxes to fit someone for a preconceived solution. I want to gather intelligence. I want to start putting together dots that might be all over the page right now. I don't know what this picture is, but if I keep collecting more, I'm going to have a pretty cool picture. So some examples could be understanding that our customers need these items in hand by September 1st. When would we have to start the manufacturing process in order to leave ourselves a safe window for completion? Wow. Or it could be.
Like there's a lot packed in that. That's fantastic. Yeah. There's so much packed in that question. Wow. There's an assumed close in there. That's just awesome.
Or it could be, let's say that we're really not sure if they have capacity.
Yeah.
I don't want to ask them, do you have capacity? Because now I'm insulting them if they have to say no. So instead, I could say one of the things we understand working with manufacturers is there's times where they need to ramp up or maybe even ramp back manufacturing capacity. So I'm just curious, how many additional shifts might we need to add in order to hit this deadline with this amount of items?
Awesome.
If they're at capacity, they'll look at you and they'll say, brother, no, we can start tomorrow. Or they might say, ooh, great question. Let's think about that. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm not saying they can't do it, but capacity might be an issue. We need to ask more questions. So I love asking when and how questions. Those are probably my two favorites, when and how. What, where can be good questions too. Sometimes who can be a good question. Mm-hmm. One of the questions, I'll stop after this, I promise. We often like to ask, are you the decision maker or who's the decision maker?
Right.
That's a great way to piss somebody off because either you are and I just undervalued you, or you're not and I just insulted you. Right. So instead, I might ask a question like, as we've learned year after year in business, no matter what industry and what company we're working with, there's always someone who loves to parachute in at the 11th hour and start asking questions. Oh, yeah. So I'm curious, who in your organization loves to insert themselves in the decision-making process at the last minute?
Right.
And I'm helping this person save face. Or another route potentially to go could be, often whether we realize it or not, organizations make decisions at interdepartment levels because there's going to be ripple effects. Different people are going to be involved. It's going to support different job functions. So I'm curious, as you take a look at this and spin it forward, at the point in time where a decision is eventually made, how many different departments would likely want to be part of that process?
Okay. Mike, how I always used to handle that on do you sign the check question was always, hey, Mike, if we come to a really good conclusion for us and want to go forward, Do we need to get anybody else involved, or can you and I just bang this out?
Yeah.
And it kind of sets people at ease a little bit too. But there's so much I want to get to. One of the things that's been, if I were reading this in 8th grade and they said, read this whole interview with Mike and Frank, and what's the central theme? I think we've come around to saving face probably 8 or 10 different times. And I don't think we can underestimate how important that is, because at the end of the day, what we're talking about is, how do you stay relevant in sales in the age of AI, when so much of what you do can be done by automation? And the answer to that is, you've got to get incredibly good at the only thing AI cannot do, and that is human-to-human contact. And Mike, it sounds to me like you're saying one of the biggest pitfalls in human-to-human contact is not understanding how to let the other person save face. That's kind of a preamble to one of the things you said about leadership, is talking about all of the levels that tie into one concept to understand. I think it was 2 people, I can't remember their names. One started with an F, it'll come to me, that I highlighted. But at any rate, you said people view how you communicate with them as proof of how much you respect them. So with all of that said about saving face, because it seems to me, the most important thing you can do is make other people feel good about themselves, and then they will feel good about you. Where do we go wrong with this so often? Why is it so important for you to mention over and over and over? Like, why are people screwing this up all the time?
All right. So here's Mike Reddington's wacky opinion on this.
Thanks, Mike. I like it.
So go back to who taught us how to communicate.
Okay.
Our parents, our grandparents, teachers, coaches. If you grew up in church or scouts or, leaders in these types of places, theater, music, whatever it was, depending on how much fun you had, maybe a couple of cops. If you think about all these people who taught us how to communicate, we were kids and they talked to us like children.
Okay.
Do this, do that. Do you know? You don't know. Why did you do that? You need to do this. You made a mistake. That's how they talk to us.
Right.
So that's all we know. We're operationally conditioned. Then we become adults, and we need to start talking to other adults, but we've been trained our whole life on how to talk to kids.
Okay.
So now we start talking to other adults in ways that we feel like we're building rapport, in ways that we feel like we're trying to help, but we end up inadvertently treading all over their self-image because we don't realize that we are accidentally making judgmental statements or asking them questions that would put them, for lack of a better phrase, at fault for answering. So if we, to quote Yoda, unlearn what we have learned. We'll just keep these movie references going as long as we can throughout the conversation. But if we unlearn what we've learned, now we can start breaking this down and say, okay, how do I communicate with people in a way that helps them feel better about saying and doing the things that I want them to say and do? Right. And you talk about the people that sign the check. These people, whether they are or aren't, it's probably a whole nother conversation. They feel like the smartest and most important person in every room they're ever in.
Sure.
So now if I walk up to them and I'm like, hey, Frank, you've been running this business. It's successful. You've been here for 20 years. You've made millions and millions of dollars. But let me tell you the mistakes you're making in your business that only I can see and you can't.
Yeah, let me show you the door.
Yeah, and kick me in the ass on the way out. If we're going to show this to 8th graders, I need to stop swearing. But in these, all too often, that is how we approach these conversations without realizing it. I need to be the expert. I need to have authority. I need to be credible. I need to have confidence and control. So we end up, it would be like living in medieval Europe, walking into a castle and telling the king, you've got a nice place here, but let me tell you all the ways I could build a better castle.
Right.
Like, you're going to get decapitated right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do it in CEOs and executive offices all the time. So thinking through, how are we asking a question? How are we setting up a question? How are we illustrating something that we've learned? Even how do we point out a mistake or an opportunity? Somebody's explaining how they use their office technology, and we see or hear, whoa, that's a big security risk. If I cut you off, I'm like, hey, Frank, do you know what a big security risk that is?
Right.
Are you going to say, no, Mike, I don't. I've been leaving a giant trap door open for my company this whole time because I'm too stupid to see it.
Right.
Whereas if I say, Frank, thank you so much for walking me through that, I really appreciate it. Time and time again, when we sit down with busy executives who are focused on the strategic direction of their company while being forced to fight the everyday fires of their business, they often don't have the time to develop the expertise in every aspect to recognize something like how XYZ creates such a security risk.
Right. Yeah, it's dicey because you want to be an expert and you don't want to be obsequious either, right? I can't just, constantly kiss your butt because if you're a good leader, you'll see through that anyway. But I do have to formulate my questions in such a way that I leave you a place to save face, as you've said a number of times. Hey, that's really important. So one of the other things that I was thinking about, Mike, in all of this questioning and listening is, as an interrogator, are there like ways that you walk into the room? Because, you've heard this thing in sales, right? Don't talk about the fish on the wall. But I want to gain rapport as quickly as I can without looking at the picture of your family and making like I'm, judging a beauty pageant, telling you how cute your kids are. So how do I begin to create rapport without being obsequious or fulfilling that stereotypical fish on the wall sales guy?
That's a great question. And I love how you did it. Years ago, I was up for a job promotion in, I was in New York, White Plains. I was in White Plains, New York.
Oh.
And I knew the guy I was interviewing with. So I walk in, I sit down, we do the interview, and he's got a die-cast model of a 67 Corvette Stingray behind him on the wall. I didn't say anything about it. Interview's over. I'm walking out. Hey, man, appreciate the time. Good to see you again. I'm curious to see how this plays out. By the way, I didn't know you were a Corvette guy. He looks at me and he laughs. He says, I'm not. So I said, well, why do you have it on your wall? And he said, that's how I kick salespeople out.
Whoa! Like a trap Corvette?
Yep.
Mike, that's genius.
Yeah. He said, if they walk in and they're like, oh, you like Corvettes? I like Corvettes. The conversation is.
Oh, that is brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love
I've never forgotten that. And I was in an investigations role then, not a sales role. But as soon as he said that, I was like, oh, brother. Yeah. So for me, rapport, I mean, there's books written on, there's some great books written on rapport out of investigations. I'll forward them on to you.
Yeah,
but rapport really is a mutual feeling. So it can be generated, but it can't be forced. And often we can build rapport by not trying to build rapport, if that makes sense.
Sure.
For me, if it's a spur of the moment meeting, if I've got 20 meetings in a day, I understand prep time can vary. But if I have enough prep time, I want to do my homework. And it doesn't have to be more than 5 minutes. I'm going to check LinkedIn. I'm going to Google a name. I'm going to go to a company page. I'm going to read a bio. I'm going to check Facebook, Instagram, whatever's readily available. I don't need to go deep. I just need to have something that I can work into a conversation.
Sure.
So instead of walking in and trying to build it right away, hey, Frank, I see you got the cover of your book on the wall behind you. You wrote a book. I wrote a book. Dude, we're authors. We should be best friends already.
We're like twins.
Yeah. We're 86 in this conversation right now.
Yeah.
But if I have seen that you read a book, and even if I didn't have time, I have read your book, by the way, but even if I didn't have time, if I just went to Amazon and read whatever preview comes out,
Sure.
I get a couple of thoughts from it. And now somewhere early in our conversation, I don't say, Frank, I read your book and I really like when you wrote X. I just say something similar to that line. And when I say something similar to that line, now you're like, oh, you think that, I think that, we have something in common. So for me, that's one of the ways I like to do it, do a little prep and work it into the conversation. Another way I like to do it is allow people to build rapport for you.
Okay.
So if you know enough about somebody, you can answer a question in a way where they're going to, it's like playing chess, and I suck at chess, but it's like you answer a question in a way where you can be pretty confident they're going to ask a follow-up question. And your answer to their follow-up question is what builds rapport. So now they feel like they're building rapport, even though this whole thing, you set up 3 or 4 moves in advance.
Mike, first of all, I want to ask you, and we're recording right now, will you come back and do this with me again?
Yeah, for sure.
Because there's so much more to talk about, and salespeople, this is a masterclass from Mike on so many different ways of asking questions and gaining rapport. One of the things that just jumped out at me that I want to dig into just a little bit with the little time we have is this idea that you're thinking about the way that you're asking questions and what responses they may come. And I get people sometimes object to me in two ways. One, I saw in your book, I shouldn't have to change the way I communicate for you. Yes, you should.
Absolutely.
Sorry, yes, you should. If you want good outcomes, it's to me, it's not. And the other thing is about asking questions because I'm looking for a particular outcome. And both of those things, people say to me, are inauthentic and I'm being manipulative. And I say, listen, if I were flying to China, I'd learn a couple of phrases in Mandarin. This is no different. I just want to be able to speak the language of the person I'm talking to facilitate the communication. Now, I'm an NLP guy. We learned, one of the tenets of NLP is you are responsible for the outcome of your communication. Case closed. And I want to be responsible. I want that responsibility. I don't want to say it was his fault, she sucks, he didn't, they didn't, I can't believe they did this to me. No. I want it on me because I can depend on me. I know where I'm going. But this idea of manipulation or inauthenticity because I'm thinking about the outcome I want and I'm peppering my language with certain kinds of words, etc. Can you give me a little bit, make that okay for me?
I would love to. In my opinion, again, Mike Reddington, take it as people want to. Manipulation is a neutral term.
Okay.
We manipulate people all day long. I have a young son. If I ask him to do anything, I probably have to manipulate him. I have to give him some motivation. I have to say it in a way that causes him to want to do it. We manipulate people all day long. When I'm at the hotel and I don't have a room and I need one, I need to manipulate this person to want to help me. I'm not manipulating him to give me a free room. I'm not manipulating him to get the security code to the computer so I can kick someone else out. Like, it's just, I want a room. So I have to make him want to help me. Right. We manipulate people all day long. For me, and we can't tell anybody what's ethical or what's moral. Like, we all have our own ethical, moral codes. For me, manipulation becomes good or bad when it comes down to what are the outcomes you're trying to achieve, what are the techniques you're using to achieve them, and what ability does your counterpart have to be aware of what you're doing.
Okay.
So if I take it to like interrogation, a disproportionate amount of false confessions are obtained from, it's probably a good way to say it, obtained from people with cognitive processing issues. Not all. There's plenty of people who could have a conversation like you or I, although I definitely have cognitive processing issues. Let's be honest about that. But there's people that might come off like you or I who still make false confessions. But the real sad portion is there are people that have cognitive processing issues. So they don't have the ability to recognize some of the things that are happening around them.
Right.
That would make it unethical. If I'm using tricks, if I'm using threats, if I'm using promises, if I have no intention on following up, if I'm trying to hurt someone or take advantage of them, all of these things would make it unethical. But to your point, if let's take it to France instead of China. I've yet to go. I've been to Nice. I've yet to go to Paris. Right. Anybody that I know that's been to Paris has been like, dude, you better learn how to speak some French before you go, because they do not respond well to people who just speak English, especially American English. Okay, parlez-vous français? I'll work on it. Yeah. Now, that's not because when I get to Paris, I want to steal, I want to cheat, I want to lie, I want to do any of those things. I would like to get the meal that I ordered on time the way I asked for it cooked. Right. I would like the cab driver to take me where I want to go the safest way possible, right? So you could argue that I'm manipulating them by learning to speak French. I would argue I want to have a safe, happy, healthy trip that gets me home on time with a camera full of great pictures, and my wife loved it, right? That's what I want. So for me, manipulation is 100% neutral. We manipulate people every day, all day long. It's the techniques, it's the intentions, it's the outcomes, and it's the ability for somebody else to be aware potentially of what we're doing.
That's huge. Mike, we got to wrap up, but I got to tell you, you have to come back because there's so much more we can explore. And I think salespeople learning this level of the game, right? Understanding the ability to listen well, the kinds of questions to ask, the way to carry yourself in, sincerity, integrity, on top of outcome-based conversations. There's a lot to explore there. I think we could do people a lot of good in this, in this world that's trying to push them aside sometimes with point-and-click technology. But as we wrap up, I'm going to say this to the audience. Do yourself a favor and do me one favor too. For your favor, get Mike's book. Just get the book. I'm telling you, it's worth every second of your time. Make sure you read it and take notes. Listening is probably the least considered aspect in selling. We've been conditioned by this crazy media archetype that we're going to be some silver-tongued devil and win the day. And the truth is, you listen your way to sales. You don't talk your way to sales. And the favor I want from me is just, click subscribe if you like what you're hearing. Give us a rating. That would be great. Mike, if people picked up 10% of what you gave here, they would up their game exponentially. It's you just so many things you dropped on them today. I can't wait to go back and review this. If people want to hire you to talk to their executive team or to talk to their sales team or, any of the number of things that you do, what's the best way for them to reach you? What do you want them to know about what you offer?
I really appreciate you asking me, man. Thank you very much. There's a couple places they can go. Inquasive.com is our business, INQUASIVE.com. That's where they can learn more about just that, the customized programs that our clients ask us to facilitate for their senior leaders, sales teams, HR teams, and beyond. If they're looking to learn more about me, see some more content, they can go to michaelreddington.com. If they're looking to learn more about the book, and thank you so much for bringing it up, man, I really appreciate it. They can go to disciplinelistening.com. They can sample the book there, learn more about it. It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, the Discipline Listening Method. You can go online and get it. Really, the only social media I'm on is LinkedIn. So they can find me at Michael Reddington, CFI on LinkedIn. My email address, if people can remember it or want to write it down, is mreddington@inquasive.com. You have it. You can include it in whatever you want.
All that'll be in the show notes. All the links Mike mentioned, etc.
I'm very happy to talk to anybody. I will go this far. If you shoot me a note and say, Mike, I listened to you and Frank talk, and I just have a question that I would like to talk to you about, I will make the time and I will help talk through whatever it is that you would like. I appreciate everybody being here. I'm really excited for you and your show. I'm thrilled that you asked me to be a small part of it. Thank you so much.
All right, man. Let's wrap it up there. Thanks so much, Mike. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ready to take your sales team or event to the next level? Visit franksomma.com to discover how Frank can coach your top performers, deliver a tailored workshop for your team, or captivate your audience with a content-packed keynote at your next event. Frank's best-selling book, B2B is really P2P, is now available on Amazon and Frank's website. Here's a special offer. As a valued listener, mention this podcast when you contact Frank and receive a 10% discount on your first coaching session, keynote, or workshop booking.
that's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Selling in the Age of AI. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to all of the topics we discussed, and of course, to connect with our amazing guests. I have to shout out big love to my production team, Neeks, Angelo, Nico of Digital Presence. You guys rock. If you want your digital presence to explode, check these guys out at digitalpresence.team. And until next time, remember, people can't point and click you. Be the difference maker for your prospects and clients.